That is probably the kindest intro I've ever had, and I'm not going to talk about it more because otherwise I might cry. Okay, so Dean is right. I have been working on watershed plans in the county and elsewhere for many years, and you guys are really lucky. We have a lot of resources already at hand in the county. Oops. So today I'm going to walk you through what resources you already have, the existing watershed plans in the county, and generally some of the really cool things you can find in those plans, including policy recommendations, some on-the-ground project recommendations, where the projects are in your neighborhood, and how to maximize funding opportunities. And yes, the whole presentation is geared towards leading up to what Michelle will be presenting later this afternoon. Okay, so a typical project path, it's like the whole goal of this is to try and get us to the point where we can start really implementing projects in the county. So just to take a step back and see what that process might look like. The very first thing you're going to want to do is, in a perfect world, have a watershed-based plan. Within those plans, we have done a lot of front-end work to set you up to go and build those projects and get funding for them. Then once you have a watershed plan and you find your project, then you need to gather your stakeholders and any sort of support agencies that you can and try and find funding. And there are a lot of avenues, if you set up your projects right, for funding these projects. There's no way any entity could afford to implement all of the projects that are in any of these plans. And then finally, after the project is built, we want to talk about implementation or construction and stewardship. I'm not going to talk about that today. Michelle might get into some of that, but just wanted to walk you through big picture. Okay, so both Dean and Peggy mentioned we have a lot of resources, and this map should be in your packets. Dean also has an amazing website, DeKalbwatersheds.com. And there's a GIS map in there that is very similar to this. But big picture, all the watersheds that are highlighted in green there is already an existing approved watershed-based plan from IEPA. The two blobs that are in purple are ones that either Dean or adjacent counties, McHenry County in this case, are working towards getting plans accomplished there. They're likely to move forward in the next year or two. And then the yellow ones are TBD sometime in the future as funding allows. So those plans include for basically Sycamore and East Branch, South Branch, Kishwaukee River Watershed Plan. Where we are today, and so the three greens that trail off towards the left of the screen, the upper South Branch, Kishwaukee. And then up towards the top, the three more hucks is Central South Branch Kishwaukee Watershed Plan. And bottom corner right is Lower Little Rock Creek, which essentially includes the city of Sandwich and up north of there. So, and the ones that are coming soon, we already know we are awarded funding for Salmonot Creek, which is down at the south end. So just waiting for a contract on that. And to take a step back, why are we doing this? We want these watershed plans because we have waters within the county that are impaired, meaning they're not meeting their targets. So all the ones you see in red here are not meeting their targets as of 2024. And we want to get them back on track. So those include South Branch, basically all of South Branch, Kishwaukee within the county, Little Indian Creek, East Branch, Killbuck Creek, Coon Creek, and Deer Creek. And typical impairments are nitrogen, phosphorus, low dissolved oxygen, sediment, and fecal coliform. And we address nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment very directly in all of these plans. So of the four plans that are existing, I have worked on three of them, and those three all include a green infrastructure chapter, essentially. So where we have developed a green infrastructure network. Think of our green infrastructure network as the undeveloped open space, preferably contiguous within a watershed. Typically, it runs along streams. These green infrastructure networks are super important to protecting ecological function and health in the watershed, improving water quality, and they benefit species. They're essentially habitat corridors. They also act as natural stormwater. This is if you leave wetlands and streams intact and they're in good shape, they will clean the water for you. And they are the key to protecting watershed health. And I know Michelle in Algonquin has used these pretty artfully to get to protect these areas and improve watershed health in Algonquin. Okay, so I took the liberty of stealing maps, key maps from several of these plans simultaneously, and I'm going to share them on screens moving forward. On the left is Upper South Branch Kishwaukee. That is the one we're sitting in now. The one in the middle is Central South Branch Kishwaukee to the north, and on the far right is Lower Little Rock Creek. These are maps of the green infrastructure network in those watersheds. And I might move through these fast. It's not meant for you to find your projects necessarily in any one of these, just show that they are out there. And all of these are available on that website that Dean mentioned. Okay, so one of the most powerful tools in those watershed plans is the action plan chapter. We really don't care about the rest of it. It's background information. We want to get to what can we do on the ground and policy-wise to protect our waters. So the chapters are typically divided in two parts. Programmatic section, which is all of the policy recommendations that we can do from a municipal or a countywide level. And then the back half is the site-specific action plans, the nitty-gritty projects. So I'm going to give you a high-level overview in the next few slides about what those might look like, especially the policy side. Those are pretty consistent over all the watershed plans. So this is just sort of a general list of those things included. Ordinance and policy recommendations, guidance on rainwater harvesting and reuse, how to do native landscaping in your communities, street sweeping, septic system maintenance, planning and protecting green infrastructure, implementing things like conservation design and low impact development, and water quality trading and adaptive management. So in the next few slides, I'm going to just go into a little bit more detail on those. First and foremost, we want to adopt those plans when they're completed. And I believe all of the communities in all those watersheds. Okay, so we got one left, but first we want to adopt all of those plans so that we can use them at a municipal level. And then there's guidance in those where we do ordinance reviews as part of this planning process with all those communities. And that is your first opportunity to start looking at the regulations in your community and seeing how you can make easy tweaks to improve water quality. Most stormwater requirements and those types of things were not designed to improve water quality. They were designed to do other things like hold stormwater volume, for example. We have included an ordinance review that specifically targets improvements that will affect water quality. We also highly encourage adopting the green infrastructure network separately and putting those in, referring to them as part of your comp plans. Those are areas that are important to protect in the future. We also have recommendations on protecting groundwater, encouraging infiltration, especially in the green infrastructure network. There's a whole slew of sensible salting and road salt use alternatives within those plans. And we also want to make sure that within your communities, you're allowing for native landscaping. Make sure that, there are some weed ordinance rules that can make it difficult to have native landscapes. We want to look at those and make sure that native landscaping is allowed. Sorry. Okay. And then finally, we will also want to make sure we're not going to talk too much about ag today because that's not quite the crowd we've got here in the room. But in all of those plans, we are encouraging that we are using principles that restore soil health. We want to encourage regenerative agriculture, and we want to rely on the programs that NRCS already has, and there are many. And we want to leverage those. And Dean, for one, has done an amazing job in the county at working towards implementing those programs. And some of those little things, again, we want to make sure that we are allowing and encouraging native plants, both in residential and business settings. Also, just outside of your community and government buildings. We also want to encourage using permeable pavers or any sort of pavement alternatives. These encourage infiltration, and they can also be built so that they have water quality benefits underground. We want to encourage street sweeping. This sounds like such a silly thing, but increasing street sweeping to even twice a month can make a significant impact on improving water quality. Think about all those pollutants that are on the roads and that wash into roads. If we can clean that up and prevent them from getting into adjacent streams, if those drains drain to a creek, this can have a huge impact. And again, that's something that's done at the municipal level. We also want to make sure that we are maintaining our septic systems. A lot of homeowners don't necessarily know when they inherit a septic system how to maintain those. So we want to make sure that we get the word out about those, and we're encouraging programs that are encouraging maintenance of septic systems. And there's all sorts of programs and tools available, both from DeKalb County, but also from US EPA. We also want to encourage rainwater harvesting and reuse. This is just a simple, you can have a rain barrel program, but essentially we want to capture water that's going to land on our homes and businesses and reuse what we can, that non-potable water, for things like watering your garden or other uses around the house. So again, we put a big focus, and there are all sorts of recommendations within the watershed plans about protecting green infrastructure and planning for green infrastructure. We want to make sure that we protect unprotected green infrastructure. And there's all sorts of tools available to do that. We want to incorporate conservation design and low impact development. Again, this is an area where Algonquin has seen a ton of success in protecting what resources remain in Algonquin. We want to limit future subdivision of large green infrastructure parcels and implement long-term management of those parcels in the future. Just a little bit more about conservation design and low impact development. Generally, it's the idea of if you have a large tract of land that a developer wants to develop, we want to conserve the areas that remain wetlands, or if there's like high quality woodlands on those sites, we want to preserve those and build around those. And generally that it means maybe giving an incentive to a developer to have maybe a little higher density in those areas, and then protect the natural portions of those. And then typically we would also want developers to turn that over to like an HOA or something like that to manage. And finally, on the programmatic side, water quality trading and adaptive management. Now, I'm going to tell you that Illinois does not officially have a program for water quality trading yet. There are neighboring states, particularly Wisconsin, that do have an entire program based around trading. But Illinois is making more rapid strides towards implementing trading, and there are already examples downstate that are happening. I think there is one. It's not Rantoul, but it's near down there. Anyway, there are examples of where wastewater treatment plants have made agreements with IEPA that where they have overages, where they're going to like miss their targets that they need to hit when they release water, they can sell those credits. So say maybe they're over in phosphorus this month. If they can find a way to pay for maybe a farmer upstream for them to implement a practice, and it's cheaper than them doing an upgrade, they are allowed to do that. This is a super technical issue, but this is a great tool to have in your back pocket. Okay, and now we're gonna jump into a whole slew of site-specific management measures. So this portion of the watershed plan is very unique to each watershed. But there are a few things that are pretty standard in all of them. Those include stream and riparian area restorations, wetland restorations, detention basin retrofits, agricultural management practices, and then what we call other management measures, which is essentially everything else. I want to pause for a minute and share. So I mentioned that I've done, wrote 3 of the watershed plans that are in DeKalb. The one that I have not is formatted just slightly differently. So I'm only showing these are the projects that they have included, and this is East Branch, South Branch, East Branch of the South Branch of the Kish. And this is the one that extends essentially from Sycamore east. So the way they did it is they basically have all of their projects on one map. So I'm sharing that here, but in subsequent slides, I am sharing the other 3 watershed plans, their projects by these various types. Okay, so one of the biggest bangs for your buck is always stream restoration, stream and riparian area restoration. This is essentially using natural channel design to repair eroded banks, restore natives to the buffers along those streams, also known as the riparian area, and maintain these in future. It also can include creating pools and riffles in the channel itself. This is sort of an example again of what like a before and after. I believe this was from Central South Branch Kish, but what they might look like. This is not a real life. This is just what it could be. This project has not been completed, just to be clear. But essentially, where we've got eroded banks, we want to regrade those and make them less steep and repair the erosion, and naturalize those banks with natives. We definitely do not want bare banks on those, because as we get a big flow of water, it's going to pull all that soil off of the banks and send it downstream. And that's not just sediment. The phosphorus and nitrogen are also tied to those soils. We also know that including water body buffers, so riparian areas, maintaining those and extending them there where we can have a huge impact on water quality. So think of, water is going to flow downhill. If at the bottom there's a stream, and between the top of the hill and the bottom we've got natural area, those natural areas can do a much better job of filtering pollutants than, say, if it's all paved or maybe farmland up to the buffer or turf grass even. So where we can, we've got guidance that says if we can have a 75-foot buffer, that'd be great. I realize that there are a lot of places where we have no buffer, and getting to 75 feet is nearly impossible, but generally the rule of thumb is the bigger the buffer, the more water quality improvement. So here we've got some stream bank restoration projects likely near you. Again, Upper South Branch, Central South Branch, and Lower Little Rock Creek on the right. Again, there are a ton of projects already out there. There are probably hundreds of stream projects between these plans. One thing that it's particularly in DeKalb and maybe in the more rural portions in the farmland, there are definitely areas where there are recovering stream channels. So perhaps there was a ditch through farmland, and I know farmers tend to maintain those ditches and keep them, or want to move the water off of the property. But there gets to a point where if you see this stream on the right, where it is, or in the middle, where there is almost, the stream itself has created a natural floodplain. On its own, it's done that. When streams get to that point, you can leave them as is. You don't need to maintain them or straighten them. This is a stable channel. It is no longer eroding. So where we have those, that's a great tool that farmers in particular can use. We also have a lot of recommendations in these plans for wetland restoration that typically involves restoring hydrology or water to areas that were once supporting wetlands, typically hydric soils. And then restore also the plants and ecological community on those areas. Wetlands are the sponge for pollutants. This is one of our biggest tools. And there are, because we live in Northern Illinois, there are absolutely tons of wetland restorations possible near you, way more than are on this map. These are just what we have found through GIS analysis in these watershed plans. We also have recommendations for detention basin retrofits. Typically, these are in the more urbanized areas. Obviously, we don't see detention basins in more rural settings. But where we have them, detention basins were typically built with the idea of holding back storm waters, not improving water quality. And there are a few simple tricks to restoring those. And typically it means restoring the banks to natives and the buffers around those. That can improve filtration quite a bit. Where we're putting in new detention basins using guidance like this, where we've got a more naturalized detention basin rather than a big rectangle hole filled with turf grass around the sides, we can get a lot more bang for a buck. So we're looking at moving from the examples on the left towards something that looks more like what's on the right. And I believe the one on the right is in either Genoa or Kingston, I forget which, but it is definitely, that is a great example of what a detention basin could look like. Again, these are some of the detention basin retrofits. These are very often within, again, municipal boundaries. And for those of you who haven't seen this before, for Upper South Branch, for the detention basins, we just zoomed in to DeKalb, the city of DeKalb, because that's where they were. Within all of these plans, we also have varying agricultural management practice recommendations. The biggest thing is we are recommending pretty much prescriptively. This is basically almost a policy recommendation. But where we've got farmers that are already participating in things like no-till or mulch till or reduced tillage, we want them to basically reduce their tillage even more. And that alone can significantly reduce nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. And again, I mentioned that within these plans, there's typically a section that covers other management recommendations. Some of the most common ones are swale retrofits. Top left photo, there are a lot of areas where we've got older residential neighborhoods that are not sewered. And they typically have swales in front of them that are turf grass. Just naturalizing those and stopping to put fertilizer, not putting fertilizer on them and not mowing them can have a pretty huge impact on preventing water quality issues. We've also got a slew of natural area restorations in those plans. Golf course naturalizations, that doesn't mean naturalizing the whole golf course, but the rough areas, we can do natives in those areas. We've got just one or two green alley retrofits, some parking lot best management practices. Again, typically those involve where we're able switching to permeable pavers, and rain garden opportunities. And typically we would do something like that in front of maybe a county building like this, or in front of schools, or in front of other government buildings, somewhere where we can put out some signage and use those as an educational tool as to what folks can do in their communities. And again, the other management recommendations we have in these plans. Again, all available online. I'm happy to chat about any of these in more detail. The specific type of watershed plans that I work on, they're referred to as a watershed base plan. And one of the most important things we do in those is prioritize projects for funding. Typically, those projects are referred to as either critical area or priority area projects. And they are most commonly the projects that are going to get us the biggest bang for your buck. In other words, the projects that are going to reduce the most amount of pollutants for the least amount of money, right? Those are noted in these plans as the highest level of funding. When you're applying for some of these funding programs, this essentially gets you an extra point if it's if it's labeled as a critical or priority area project, and we have done that liberally within the plans. So there's lots of these. Sorry, this was again Upper South Branch, and then I put the other two on this map. So Central South Branch and Lower Little Rock. Okay, and then what I would think of as the holy grail of the watershed base plans is somewhere in the towards the end, you're going to have this great big multi-page table. It's referred to as typically the site-specific action plan table or the project table. And within that, we've done a whole bunch of homework for you. It has all these details, including location, the type of project, some basic existing conditions, and what our restoration recommendations are. It includes some rough calculations on what we think the expected pollutant removal is and the priority of that project, who's responsible for implementing that project, the landowner, et cetera, and who can help you. Like what support agencies can help you implement those projects, a very rough cost estimate, and a timeline for doing these. And this is all the information you need typically to go out for funding. So we're basically paving the way for you. If you have a project and you're trying to go out for funding, look here first, because a lot of the info you're going to need for these programs is here in these tables. Okay, and there are still plenty of funding programs out there that have not been threatened and have not been taken away from us. And they cover things like water quality, restoration, agriculture, flooding and stormwater management, recreation and trails, and wildlife. There are programs out there through NRCS, FEMA, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, Illinois Farm Bureau, and IDNR, and also local community groups like DeKalb County Community Foundation, who funded all 3 of the plans. Actually all 4 of the plans that we have already done. the biggest thing we want to do is maximize funding opportunities for you guys. We know that money is probably the most likely culprit of why, that's going to keep us from implementing these things. And there are resources out there to help you get these funded. Um, First and foremost, I recommend focusing on where you have willing landowners. If you have people that are interested in doing this kind of work, or they are mission-driven folks and they own land, start with start with those people. Where possible, in a perfect world, we would love to start from the headwaters, up at the top of the watershed, and work our way down. Not always feasible, but that is the approach we want to take. And you want to start early on in the process in planning your projects. There are so many ways to incorporate green infrastructure, natural landscaping, flood benefits, habitat benefits, these water quality benefits, just simple tweaks. Even if you have a project that maybe it has nothing to do with this, if you find a way, like maybe let's say you've got a park property and you have an opportunity, you can naturalize some of those areas. I bet I can get you grant funding for those. There are a lot of different programs, and if you just take a moment to think when you're just in the concept phase of those projects on how you can leverage some of these programs, that's a great way to set you up for funding. You also, it would behoove you to just reach out to those funding agencies early and talk to them. Most of these people are just thrilled to talk to them. I talk to Jeff Edstrom at IEPA, like, I don't know, probably every other month. And I've gotten a ton of projects funded. If most of these programs, if you can get your grant sort of drafted, a couple weeks ahead of the deadline, these reviewers will be happy to review them ahead of time and give you edits and feedback on how you can make it stronger. So there's lots of tricks there. And finally, reach out to your neighbors, other municipal leaders, or people at the county, or consultants like me that have experience in getting grants, for tips on some of these programs. There's a lot and things change from year to year. So that is all I have today. I did want to just land on this slide, again, just to remind you that there are such great resources out there already. We've got 4 completed watershed-based plans, a couple more in the works in the next few years, and then those yellow ones are coming a little later. Any questions I can answer? Yes.
Thank you, Cecily. Great presentation. I have a follow-up question on funding.
Yep.
To what degree does IEPA influence or more likely to fund a project if there are a variety of rated sources? In other words, evidence of collaborative funding coming from different sources.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes. So with most grants, IEPA, IDNR grants, definitely all the state grants I could think of, and actually probably the federal ones as well. If you can show that you already have a big group of people that are all working towards the same goal, and are either contributing financially or just with in-kind matching of any kind or technical expertise, that goes a long way to getting funding in all of these. It's like an essential point. It shows them that there are people that are willing to be there once it's implemented, that they would know that they've got resources to keep those maintained over time, and they're not just throwing away money. And they like to work with folks that they know and have worked with before. Again, another reason you want to reach out to those entities early and often.
Something I can add to that too, Cecily, for EPA now, and I think GEICO and specifically the 319, they have really dialed out any bias. It is very, very much on a point system, and it's very objective. So
yeah, all of those programs will very clearly within the notice of funding that will go out, there will be a whole page dedicated to what the ranking criteria are and how many points you receive depending on your answer. And I will tell you what, if you, while you're filling out those grant applications, you should be tracking what your scores are. And essentially the narratives on your grant applications should be showing evidence like, we got 3 points for this one, we've got 5 points for this credit, just make it as easy as possible. Jeff Edstrom has said, for example, a million times, they want it to be spoon fed. They want all the evidence there so that they can just easily say, yep, that's a project we're gonna fund.
And they do it by I think they used to do it a little bit like looking at it less objectively and kind of what was around and stuff. It's strictly based on who's got the highest points.
Yep.
But to what Cecily said, showing that you're collaborating, you have multiple partners and stuff, those are things that you do get points for in that section of the grant. So it is important to have all that.
Yeah, even the difference between whether, you've got a group that has just written a letter versus you have a letter of understanding between you and whoever the landowner is or what have you, that makes a difference. It's in the point totals.
So I have a question on the grants.
Yeah.
So for a 319 water quality grant from IEPA, they fund
60%.
60% of the project.
Yep.
So you're coming up with the other 40%.
Correct. Yep.
And the applicant can be park district, forest preserve, municipality, a watershed group.
Absolutely, anyone that has a GATA and Amplifund account. So GATA is the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act. It's this whole online system, and Amplifund is the corresponding way where it's the program that they use to where you would apply for funding and also manage the grant afterwards. So any entity that has that access can apply for funding. It is not typically available directly for residents because they wouldn't typically have that access, but any entity that has that GATA access could sponsor essentially and manage the funds for that a resident or anyone else. So another hand up somewhere.
The last bullet point there, Sunlight Creek Watershed, coming soon. Show of hands, anyone landowners in the Sunlight Watershed in this room? Municipal staff?
Kelsey's coming for you. Any other questions? All right, I'm here all day. And also I just want to tell you guys, I love getting grants for projects. That is my dream. So if anyone has questions in any way, call me, email me, message me. I am here. I will help you in any way I can to get projects in the ground. Thanks.